The house in Atherton was less a home and more a monument to success, a cold cathedral of glass and white marble built in the heart of Silicon Valley. Its massive windows framed a perfect, silent panorama of the San Francisco Bay, a view worth millions that offered zero comfort. Inside, the oppressive quiet was constantly shattered by the piercing, relentless cries of two infants. The sound ricocheted off the minimalist surfaces, amplifying the anguish until it felt like a physical presence. This was a place designed for ultimate comfort, equipped with every conceivable luxury, yet it had become a prison of despair. It was a house that had everything money could buy, but the one thing it desperately needed, a sense of human warmth, was nowhere to be found. It was a gilded cage echoing with the purest form of sorrow. Ethan sat on the polished hallway floor, a man defeated in his own kingdom. At 42, he was a titan of the tech world, a genius who could command a boardroom of sharks with a single, quiet gesture. He wore a custom-tailored suit that probably cost more than most people's cars, but it was rumpled and seemed out of place on his slumped frame. Deep, dark circles were carved under his eyes, a testament to sleepless nights and a grief that had settled deep into his bones. His gaze, once sharp enough to dissect a faulty line of code or a weak business proposal, was now lost and powerless, staring at nothing. He was a master of a global empire, yet he was completely and utterly incapable of soothing his own children, the two tiny, screaming legacies of the wife he had lost in childbirth. Then it happened. The crying stopped, not gradually, not one baby after the other, but both at once. The silence that followed was abrupt and absolute, so profound it was more jarring than the noise it replaced. For a moment, Ethan didn't move, his mind struggling to process the sudden peace. Was it real? He pushed himself up, his expensive suit crinkling, his body stiff with exhaustion and a new, unfamiliar dread. He followed the non-existent sound, his footsteps unnaturally loud in the vast, quiet corridor. He moved, not like the owner of the mansion, but like an intruder, creeping toward the nursery, his heart pounding a frantic rhythm against his ribs, half expecting to find something terrible, half praying for a miracle he no longer believed in. He paused at the doorway, peering into the soft glow of the nightlight, and what he saw defied all logic. There, in the rocking chair, sat Clara, the new housekeeper he'd hired just for cleaning. She was a woman of 58, with a serene face and hands calloused from a lifetime of hard work. In each of her arms, she held one of his sons, Leo and Theo. They were both sound asleep, their small faces, usually red and contorted with tears, now showing a look of absolute, perfect peace. Clara was humming a soft, ancient melody, a tune so quiet it was barely a whisper. Ethan stood there, paralyzed, watching this simple, unassuming woman accomplish what he, with all his power and fortune, had deemed impossible. It was a sight that broke through his defenses, exposing the raw, aching depth of his own inadequacy. It's in these moments of profound surrender that we find unexpected grace. And if you subscribe, you'll help us continue to bring more stories like this one to light. He approached the nursery with a reverence he usually reserved for a signed contract sealing a billion-dollar deal. His voice, when it finally came, was a fractured whisper, a sound completely alien in the house of a man known for his unwavering composure. "How?" he asked. The single word carrying the weight of 1,000 sleepless nights, of a grief so vast it had its own gravity. Clara didn't look up at first, her focus entirely on the gentle rhythm of the rocking chair, on the two small chests rising and falling in perfect unison against her own. She was a placid island in his ocean of chaos. When she finally met his gaze, her eyes held no triumph, only a deep, abiding calm that seemed to absorb all the frantic energy in the room, leaving only a profound sense of peace in its wake. Her answer was as simple and unadorned as she was. "They just needed to hear the right song," she said, her voice soft, barely disturbing the sacred silence she had created. As Ethan listened more intently, the faint melody she was humming began to coalesce in his mind, pulling at the frayed edges of a memory he thought he had lost forever. It was Helena's song, the tune she would hum absent-mindedly while rubbing her swollen belly, dreaming of the two lives she was carrying. A dam of grief and memory broke inside him. It wasn't just the silence she had brought, it was the sound of his wife's love, resurrected in the most unexpected way, a ghost of a melody that was more real and comforting than anything his fortune could ever buy. In that moment, all pretense of employer and employee dissolved. He was no longer a tech mogul, he was just a father, broken and desperate. "Please," he begged, the word raw and stripped of all pride. "Don't leave. Name your price, anything. Just stay." He wasn't offering her a promotion, he was pleading for a lifeline. Clara looked from his shattered face to the sleeping infants in her arms, a silent understanding passing between them. She didn't ask for more money or a different title. She simply nodded, a quiet affirmation that went far beyond any contractual agreement. She would stay, not for the salary, but for the promise she saw sleeping in her arms and the profound sorrow she saw in the father's eyes. It was a pact made in the quiet language of shared humanity. The days that followed were a quiet revelation. The Atherton mansion, once a cold echo chamber of infant sorrow, began to transform. The piercing wails were replaced by the soft gurgles of contented babies and the constant, gentle undercurrent of Clara's humming. She moved through the sterile halls not like a cleaner, but like a gentle breeze, tidying up the chaos of both the house and the lives within it. She taught Ethan the simple, rhythmic art of swaddling, the patient way to warm a bottle to the perfect temperature, and how to read the subtle cues of his sons. He started leaving the office earlier, drawn home not by duty, but by a magnetic pull toward the newfound peace, a peace that had a name and a face, Clara. This fragile tranquility, however, was not destined to last. The first crack appeared during a phone call with his mother-in-law, Eleanor, a woman whose love for her late daughter was matched only by her rigid sense of propriety. "I heard you let the last nanny go," she said, her voice laced with a familiar, clipped disapproval. "Ethan, you need a professional, a registered nurse, not who did you say was watching them, the cleaning lady." The words hung in the air, heavy with judgment. To Eleanor, Clara was an unacceptable variable, a disruption to the established order of things, and her skepticism was a clear warning that a storm was gathering on the horizon, threatening to wash away the calm Ethan had so desperately found. It's so hard when a person's pure intentions are met with suspicion, when an act of simple kindness is viewed through a lens of cynicism and distrust. It's a quiet kind of injustice that can wear down even the strongest spirit. If you believe that stories of unassuming heroes deserve a voice, your subscription helps us continue to share them and honor their silent contributions. Eleanor's judgment wasn't just about a nanny. It was a fundamental misunderstanding of the human connection that had saved Ethan's family. She saw a housekeeper in a role she didn't belong in, while Ethan saw the only person who had been able to reach his sons in their grief, a guardian who had appeared when all hope seemed lost. Ethan found himself caught in a silent tug-of-war. A part of him, the logical, business-minded part, understood Eleanor's concerns. On paper, it made no sense. He could afford the best childcare professionals in the world, yet he was entrusting his sons to a woman with no formal qualifications, a woman whose only credential was a mysterious, magical ability to soothe his children. He would watch her from his office doorway, seeing the genuine affection in the way she held Leo, the gentle way she spoke to Theo, and his heart would swell with a gratitude so immense it physically ached. But then Eleanor's voice would echo in his mind, planting seeds of doubt and guilt, making him question the very miracle he was witnessing. The narrator of this story could see that Clara was a woman forged by a life that had demanded resilience. Her serenity wasn't a lack of experience, but a product of it. In her small, neat room off the kitchen, she kept a single, faded photograph on her nightstand. It was of a young man in a military uniform, her son, lost 20 years ago. She had learned long ago that some wounds never heal. They simply become a part of you, a source of quiet strength and a deep well of empathy for the pain of others. Her care for Leo and Theo wasn't a job. It was a calling, a way to pour a lifetime of unspoken motherly love into two little boys who desperately needed it, a way to honor a memory that was hers alone. The bond between them solidified one feverish night. Theo woke up with a croupy cough, a harsh, barking sound that sent a jolt of pure panic through Ethan. He was already dialing 911 when Clara appeared, a calm presence in the doorway. She took one look at the struggling infant, felt his forehead, and immediately went to the bathroom, turning the shower on, as hot as it would go. She sat with Theo in the steam-filled room, her hand rubbing his back in slow, steady circles, humming her familiar lullaby until the terrifying cough subsided into a normal breath. She had seen this 100 times before. Ethan watched, humbled and awestruck, realizing that her wisdom was worth more than any degree or certification. Eleanor, however, remained unconvinced. She escalated her campaign, arriving one afternoon unannounced. Beside her stood a stern-looking woman in a crisp white uniform, clutching a leather-bound portfolio. "Ethan, this is Miss Albright," Eleanor announced, her tone leaving no room for argument. She has impeccable references and a degree in early childhood development from Stanford. She is the professional your sons deserve." It was an ambush, a direct challenge laid bare in the middle of the living room. Clara, who had been folding baby clothes on the sofa, froze, the tiny shirt in her hands suddenly feeling like a lead weight. She was being replaced, her quiet care deemed insufficient in the face of a resume. This is that moment of truth. The kind that defines a person not by what they achieve in public, but by who they choose to stand by in private. It's a crossroads where the heart's wisdom goes to battle with the world's logic. By subscribing, you're helping us tell more stories about these crucial turning points, celebrating the quiet courage it takes to trust a feeling over a fact. Ethan looked at the perfectly qualified Miss Albright, then at Clara, who stood silently, her dignity a shield against the blatant insult. He saw his two sleeping sons in the bassinet nearby, their faces peaceful for the first time in their lives, and he knew there was no real choice to be made. He took a deep breath, the air in the room thick with tension. "Thank you for coming, Miss Albright," he said, his voice even and firm, "but your services won't be needed." He then turned to his mother-in-law. "Eleanor, Clara is staying. She is family." He didn't offer a lengthy explanation or a defense. He didn't need to. The conviction in his voice was absolute. It was a declaration of loyalty that drew a clear line in the sand. He was choosing the unexplainable, profound peace Clara had brought into his home over the cold, credentialed world Eleanor represented. The battle was far from over, but in that moment, Ethan had chosen his side, and the foundation of his new family grew stronger. Eleanor's victory was delivered in a thin manila folder, placed on the marble kitchen island with a quiet thud that echoed like a gunshot. "I had her looked into," she stated, her voice devoid of emotion, a surgeon presenting a terminal diagnosis. For the boys, safety. Inside were documents, timelines, and a single, damning fact. Clara had been a nurse at the very hospital where Helena had spent her final days. The implication was a venomous whisper in the sterile air. This wasn't a coincidence. It was a calculated infiltration. Ethan stared at the papers, the black and white text blurring into an indictment of his own judgment. He felt a cold dread creep into his heart, a sickening feeling that the one source of warmth in his desolate world was a carefully constructed lie. The peace he had cherished now felt like a fragile deception about to be shattered. He found Clara in the nursery, rocking an empty chair, humming the familiar tune as she folded a small pile of freshly laundered onesies. The folder felt unnaturally heavy in his hand, a dead weight of suspicion. He didn't want to ask, didn't want to know, but Eleanor's words had planted a seed of poison that was already taking root. "You were a nurse," he said, his voice sounding hollow and foreign to his own ears. "At St. Catherine's." The same time Helena was there. He watched her face for any flicker of deceit, any sign of the opportunist his mother-in-law had painted her to be. He needed this to be a misunderstanding, but the evidence in the folder was clinical and irrefutable. "Why didn't you tell me? Why come here as a housekeeper? What did you want from us?" Clara stopped folding. She placed the tiny garment on the pile with deliberate care before turning to face him. Her expression held no fear, no guilt, only a profound and weary sadness, as if she had been expecting this conversation all along. "I didn't want anything from you, Mr. Henderson. I came to give something back." She spoke of the long, quiet nights on the maternity ward, the sterile hum of monitors, and the unwavering courage of a young woman she had come to know not as a patient, but as a friend in the final, fleeting hours of her life. She described how Helena would talk for hours about the two lives she was carrying, about the man she loved, and about the future she knew she would never see. Clara wasn't speaking as an employee, she was bearing witness to a final testament. Her gaze was direct, her voice steady as she delivered the heart of her truth. "She knew she wasn't going to make it," Clara said softly. "The night before she passed, she made me promise. She was so afraid her boys would grow up in a world without her voice, without her touch. She made me promise that if fate ever gave me the chance, I would find them and sing them her song, so they would always know their mother's love was with them." She explained how she had left nursing after that, the grief too heavy to carry in that environment. For months, she held on to the promise until a cleaning agency mentioned a job in Atherton for a widower with twin boys. It wasn't a plan. It was a pilgrimage, the fulfillment of a sacred oath. The world tilted on its axis. The folder slipped from Ethan's numb fingers, scattering its useless papers across the floor. This wasn't a betrayal. This was a miracle. Clara was not an intruder. She was a guardian, a messenger sent by Helena herself. A dam of grief, walled up for months by denial and duty, finally burst. A sob tore from his chest, a raw, ragged sound of a heart breaking and healing all at once. He didn't see a housekeeper anymore. He saw his wife's last act of love, a love so powerful it had reached across death to comfort their sons. He staggered forward, collapsing into a chair, his face in his hands, finally allowing himself to weep, not just for what he had lost, but for the incredible, impossible gift he had just been given. When the storm of tears subsided, a profound calm settled over the house, a quiet that was not empty but full. The scattered papers of the investigation lay on the floor, forgotten artifacts of a suspicion that had been washed away by truth. Ethan looked at Clara, and for the first time, he didn't see an employee or even a savior. He saw a link in a chain of love that death had failed to break. That evening, he didn't ask her to stay. He asked her to move into the guest wing, not as staff, but as family. He began to fill the cold. Minimalist spaces with photographs of Helena, her smiling face bringing a warmth to the white marble that no fireplace ever could. The mansion, once a monument to his success, slowly began its transformation into a home, a place where grief and gratitude could coexist, held together by the gentle, constant melody of a lullaby. A few days later, Eleanor arrived, braced for a confrontation, only to find a scene of impossible peace. Ethan sat on the floor, building a block tower with his sons, While Clara hummed softly from the rocking chair, he told his mother-in-law the entire story. His voice steady and free of accusation, he simply laid out the facts of a promise kept, of a love that had found its way back. The rigid certainty in Eleanor's posture crumbled, replaced by a wave of profound shame that gave way to a dawning understanding. She walked over to Clara, her eyes filled with tears, and offered an apology that was quiet but absolute. It was a moment of healing that rippled outward. Inspired by the selfless promise Clara had fulfilled, Ethan channeled his resources into a new venture, establishing the Helena Foundation, an organization to support widowed parents, ensuring no one had to face that same darkness alone. 10 years passed like a gentle, sunlit dream. The Atherton mansion was no longer a silent cathedral of glass, but a vibrant sanctuary of joy. Leo and Theo, now energetic 10-year-olds with their mother's bright eyes and their father's determined spirit, chased each other through a garden that was lush and full of life. From the porch, Ethan watched them, the deep lines of exhaustion on his face, long since replaced by the easy smile of a present and contented father. Beside him, Clara, her hair now a soft, elegant silver, sat in her favorite rocking chair, her hands resting peacefully in her lap. She was the undisputed matriarch of their unconventional family, a grandmother in every sense of the word, her presence a constant, reassuring reminder of the miracle that had rebuilt their lives from the ashes of loss. The foundation became Ethan's true legacy, a testament to the idea that compassion was the most valuable asset of all. One afternoon, he found himself sitting across from a young man, a new father lost in the same fog of grief he had once navigated. Ethan didn't offer hollow condolences or financial advice. He simply told his story of a cold house filled with crying, of a quiet woman with a secret promise, and of a simple song that had the power to heal a broken family. He was passing on the hope that had been given to him, a lifeline woven from kindness and a promise kept. It is for the sake of these profound, life-altering connections that we share these stories, and when you subscribe, you help us ensure that no tale of quiet grace is ever lost, bringing light to those who need it most.